IMF pressure, the Kenyan government has recently privatized Kenya Railways, resulting in the layoff of 4,000 workers.
Njoki Getetwa is coordinator of Kenya Debt Relief Network.
IMF and World Bank in this country, with their structural adjustment program, has completely destroyed the social fabric of this country. What is important is that is the insistence that workers must be sacked. You increase employment in a country that is trying to generate employment. You increase frustrations in a country which is trying to hold together its social fabric. You increase social turmoil in a country that is supposed to be stable. Because once you destroy, you sack somebody from jobs, what you're doing in effect is to tell that country to go to hell and suffer. You're causing social breakdown.
The World Bank is insisting on even privatizing as essential a resource as Kenya's water, in spite of the disastrous consequences of this policy all over the world. These include sharp price increases, greater unemployment, corruption, and severe declines in accessibility, service, and quality. Already, only 14% of Kenyan households have piped-in water.
Through privatization, the World Bank has encouraged massive corruption in Africa and the rest of the South. As author Sue Hawley explains in her report on corruption written for the British NGO Corner House, the growth of corruption across the globe is largely the result of rapid privatization of public enterprises, along with the reforms to downsize and undervalue civil services pushed on developing countries by the World Bank, the IMF, and Western governments supporting their transnational corporations. Hawley estimates that Western corporations pay $80 billion in bribes a year.
Joseph Stiglitz, former chief economist at the World Bank, called privatization briberization. He spoke about how some politicians gladly sold their electricity and water companies. You could see their eyes widen, he said, at the possibility of commissions for shaving a few billion off the sale price.
Kenya's US-backed ruling class is well known for its astounding corruption, especially in the era of President Daniel Arap Moi, who ruled for 24 years. Moi set up a kleptocracy and assassinated and tortured his opponents. Under him, the Kenyan elite and Western multinationals monopolized Kenya's wealth, making it one of the most unequal nations in the world. The richest 10% of the population control almost half of Kenyan wealth, while the poorest 10% have only 1%. Under the direction of the World Bank, privatization became another mechanism of corruption to increase the wealth of the elite and Western companies.
Mwai Kibaki, the current president, has been beset by two major corruption scandals that have forced the resignation of 3 of his ministers. Beginning in 1992, on the insistence of Western governments and the World Bank, the Kenyan government put up 207 companies for sale in one of the biggest privatizations in Africa. Many companies have been sold far below their market value, resulting in enormous losses to the state. Not only has the World Bank encouraged corruption in Kenya, it has directly participated in it. In May 2002, the bank's officer in charge of Kenya's roads program pleaded guilty to bribery.
For example, a company like a telecommunication industry is privatized. Once a company like Kenya Railways is privatized, once anything is privatized, it is always a player, it's always an interplay of strategic forces and interests to take control of that given industry. We have seen industries in this country which were privatized when the business class and some people in the business class are very well prepared. We are talking about a situation where they are privatized when multinationals are very, very much aware. So the people come exactly take these industries. It's not even the people. It's strategic players in the corporate world. And this corporate world, they part with a lot of money to support operatives within the government. It means that there was a lot of resources and interests that were exchanged basically to tilt the balance and to generate corruption and bad governance.
Since most African countries are largely agricultural, the distribution of land is the most important economic issue on the continent. In South Africa, 13 years after the end of formal apartheid, a tiny white elite still owns most of the land, while millions of black farmers are landless. 87% of South Africa's land is owned by white, Dutch, and British colonizers, as well as by foreigners living outside the country. Many of these are multinational corporations such as Anglo-American, De Beers, and Monsanto. Whites make up 12% of South Africa's population.
The World Bank is setting South Africa's land policy and has told the African National Congress government not to expropriate land or it will be economically punished. The bank insists that the decision to sell land should be up to the owners and the government should pay the high prices that they demand. Mainly because of the denial of land, 61% of black South Africans live in poverty, and close to 40% of all South Africans are unemployed. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has warned, quote, "We are sitting on a powder keg," unquote.
Molefe Pilane is an organizer for the Landless People's Movement in South Africa.
We created this organization after we realized that the issue of land in South Africa has been ignored even by the new rulers of South Africa who won independence in 1994 from the colonizers, the Dutch colonizers. They were then advised by the World Bank and the IMF to say that they should not take the land which was taken from the indigenous people in the past. They should not take it away from the colonizers, but instead they should use money, the state coffers, to actually buy the land from the colonizers or the settlers. So some of the settlers have been pushing the prices of the land deliberately high, knowing that they will make profit out of that. So the process has actually stalled, has actually stopped, because the government does not have enough resources to buy the land. But also, if they try to amend the law to say that they're gonna maybe expropriate some of the land, the value of the rand, which is our currency, collapses because of the international, connections of the IMF and the World Bank and the multinationals. So that's the situation that we find ourselves, that the multinationals, the US, through its agencies of the IMF and the World Bank, is forcing African countries to actually buy land which was taken by the settlers, from the settlers with high prices.
The South African Landless People's Movement's tactics focus on education.
So that's a very difficult situation that we find ourselves in. But the resistance has been there. We've been organizing people around the issue of land and educating people about how land is important so that it can help them to grow food, to take them out of poverty. People are starting to understand that they have to stand up on their own and confront this US imperialism that is being, pushed down their throat through their agencies of IMF and the World Bank and other international monetary agencies.
You have been listening to Economic War, the second episode of the documentary series The Ravaging of Africa.
The Ravaging of Africa is dedicated to the memory of Patrice Lumumba.
This series was written by Asad Ismi and produced by Christian Schwartz. Go to www.asadismi.ws, that's www.asadismi.ws, for more information or to download the series.
Translation by Maziyar Mahajir at Toronto Conversation Corner and Farid Omar. Voiceover by Benedicta Madavo.
Theme music is Ner Balankina by Captain Yaba from Ghana.
This series was funded by Canadian Union of Public Employees Local 3903, QP National, Canadian Union of Postal Workers National, CUPW North Bay Local, Canadian Labour Congress, Public Service Alliance of Canada, Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and Mining Watch Canada.
Thank you for listening.